Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Commsave Conversations. My name's James Richards. I'm the Strategic Partnership Manager at Commsave, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Gavin Morris from the Money and Pension Service. Hi, Gavin.
Hi, James. Nice to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you with us. Thank you very much indeed for joining. Before we get into talking about Talk Money Week, which is the main topic of our podcast today, perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about the Money and Pension Service and your role within that.
Yeah, I think probably to put it simply, the Money and Pension Service exists to really promote financial well-being across the UK. And my role is to do that in the East Midlands area. So that's working with partners from, credit unions like yourselves, NHS, DWP, and any businesses as well. So we aim to reach as many people as possible.
Great. And I think we'll talk about during the podcast, there are quite a lot of resources that you've got available that I think will be relevant to this conversation. So I'm sure we'll touch on those. So we're here to mark Talk Money Week, which is running between the 3rd and 7th of November. The theme for this year's Talk Money Week is Start the Conversation. So this is about encouraging people to have open conversations about their finances, everything from pocket money to pensions. Perhaps you could just tell us a little bit more about Talk Money Week and in particular this theme of Start the Conversation.
Yeah, I think Talk Money Week, as you alluded to, it's something we run every year. And we're just trying to find different ways to make talking about money as natural as possible for people. Some of the work that we do, we do quite a lot of research as an organisation, but, coming out of that, people who talk more about money, they're more likely to make better and less risky financial decisions. It can also feed into stronger personal relationships. So if those conversations about money are a natural thing, then it strengthens those relationships. I think if you're having those conversations with children, I think we'll probably expand on that later on. But I think the earlier you have conversations with children, it can just help them form good money habits for life. And I think overall, just talking about money can just make people perhaps a little less anxious and feel a little bit more in control.
Yeah, I think that definitely rings true. It seems to be one of those things that there is still this taboo about, but very much being open, I guess, and having those conversations is the starting point of taking control.
I think so, and I think it's that. What I quite like about this year's theme, Start the Conversation, is that it's not putting a huge burden on people. It can be just something like, a quick informal conversation with a partner, or, have we done a budget, or, with a child, how are you spending your pocket money? It's that simple.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, picking up on that exact issue about younger people in particular, it's something that we're very much passionate about at Commsave. We spend quite a lot of time doing activities in this area. And yet we know financial education forms only a relatively small part of school life. So what can parents and carers do in this kind of space?
Yeah, I think you've touched on a couple of really important points there, and I think we have a lot of conversations with schools, and it's difficult, that there are timetable constraints. So I think it's really important that children's informal networks, whether that's parents, grandparents, carers, siblings, even they pick up that slack. I talked about the fact earlier on, research shows that the earlier in life money conversations happen, the better. And research does show that if you have those conversations, it actually does lead to better financial outcomes in later life for people. So it's really important that those conversations happen. The other thing is that often people, and children in particular, they'll actually develop their attitude to money in early life. And sometimes we find when you talk to people, certainly talk to people my age, they say, oh, parents never really spoke to us about money, or they even steered them away from certain conversations about money. I've heard people say that, oh, I was told that investing isn't for people like us.
Yeah.
So it's about having those conversations and making, helping people understand that, everyone, can fully participate in a financial, in a full financial sort of planning environment for life, really.
Yeah, very much so. I think there's some really quite stark statistics in this kind of area as well about the risks that a lot of young people are exposed to when it comes to money. There was one I saw that I think was from the Money and Pension Service that said 52% of children buy things online without parental supervision at least some of the time. And you kind of hear these horror stories about in-game purchases on, consoles and this type of thing. So it's one of those reasons I think it does kind of really strike you that the conversation is important to have there so that young people do understand the implications of these things that they're presented with.
Yeah, and often, with young people, they don't realise that they're actually spending money, and I think in-app purchases are a really good example of that. We have resources which we'll come on to aimed at young people. It's called Talk, Learn, Do, and they're available on the Money Helper side, and it talks people through things like in-app purchases.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we've done, Commsave, is we work with our local football club, Northampton Town FC. They have an absolutely brilliant community trust who work across so many areas within our county. And one of the programs that they have is called Money Matters, where they work with primary and secondary school groups right across the county. And we've helped them, worked with them to develop this Money Matters resource, which are available on our website. If anyone is listening and is interested to know more, you can visit commsave.co.uk and have a look at our resources page. That's something we would very much encourage people to do. It's a free resource that's out there, and it's about a way of opening up those conversations about topics like saving and budgeting that oftentimes we might take for granted.
I think that's really important because, as I said earlier on, often there isn't curriculum time, but I'm aware of, several, organisations like yourselves going into schools, and running events not just aimed at children, so not necessarily, with curriculum time, but also aiming events at parents as well. So, for example, I had one example recently of an institution running financial education sessions for parents, but to coincide with parents' evening. Yeah. So they go in to talk about the children, and then there's a session on for them there as well. So that's just a really good example of how everyone can get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the other things that we've touched on is the resources that are out there. And one of the things I know I've used quite a lot, and I think is a fantastic resource for people, is the Money Helper website. So I wondered if you could just maybe say a little bit about how that's a resource that can help people with conversations about money.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do that. But before I sort of go into detail, I think just from experience, when people hear about, money resources online, they're often a bit suspicious. So, if people just remember a couple of things from our conversation today, certainly in terms of the Money Helper site, James, first of all, it's completely free to use. And secondly, it's completely impartial. So no one's going to try and sell anyone anything. So that's the starting point. But on there are all kinds of resources that will cover not only every age group, but also life events as well. So, for example, that there's sections that cover things like pensions and retirement, which I think we'll go on to talk about. There's resources that talk about savings and investing, obviously budgeting. There's a whole range of online tools. You talked about the budgeting tool, but there's pension calculators on there. There's even tools that will help people find the right annuity. There's a really important one, which I think if people have been putting off doing some financial planning, there's something called midlife MOT tool. And that's really interactive, really simple to use. You answer a few quick questions about what you've done so far, and what you'll end up with is like a checklist or a to-do list of actions to take. So that's something that takes about 5 to 10 minutes of people's time. And I would encourage anyone who's just looking to take that first step into planning to perhaps use that as a starting point. But there's also resources that cover, life events such as, getting married, buying a first home, divorce, illness, and there's resources that help people, planning for later life as well. So, making a will, powers of attorney, that sort of thing. So, really useful site. And what it has got is a very powerful search engine on it as well. So if you're not sure exactly what you're looking for, type some phrases in and the resources will come up. The other way to navigate it, of course, is the banners across the top, which have those main headings that I talked about before.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think it's a fantastic resource, and I really like the way the materials are written as well. I think they're clear and concise, and I think they're as far as possible, they're really jargon free. So I think they're a really nice way into understanding lots of different topics. So yeah, we'll put the link to the website in the description for the video, and yeah, very much encourage people to check that out. So the next thing I thought it would be useful to touch on, although it's perhaps less in the news than it was 18 months, 2 years ago, is that people are very much still facing challenges with cost of living issues, particularly with food prices. What can somebody do if they're in this situation and they're finding that they're still struggling to make ends meet? What kind of resources are out there for them? What kind of things can they do?
Well, there is another really useful section on the Money Helper site that covers that. And there's actually a section entitled Help with the Cost of Living. There's a number of resources in there. We've already talked about the budgeting tool, but something I think that is really important on there is what we call a bill prioritizer tool. So what we often find when people are perhaps in financial difficulties, if you actually analyze what people are spending, that they're often paying non-priority debts first. So what this bill prioritizer tool does is help people prioritize which bills they should be paying. So normally it's things like council tax. So if you're in council tax arrears, that's one of the debts that's enforceable by bailiff. Whereas there's others where, if you do owe money, I think a credit card is one example, where bailiffs won't come knocking. So what that tool does is it just helps people, organise the finances. So, even if money's short, they are paying off the bills in the right order.
Yeah.
So that's quite a useful tool. Yeah, there's lots of other things there as well. There are, in that help with the cost of living, there are some really useful links to where you can get more help, and that includes emergency support as well. So in terms of real practical stuff, that sort of resource can link people towards where they can get, like emergency vouchers and things like that. But I'm also, there's obviously food banks, but there's also a rise in community larders as well. And I think in the Northampton areas, that the Northampton Hope Centre offers that facility. I think they've got
That's right.
3 sites in the region.
Yeah, I think it does feel like an increasingly important and part of the solution, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, just helping people to, have that extra option without necessarily some of the stigma, I guess, that might go along with visiting food banks. It's not something people should feel any embarrassment or shame about, but I think naturally a lot of people are quite reticent about using those facilities. So I think a community larder is a really interesting alternative, I guess.
I think so. It's sort of a broader offering, I think, isn't it? But as you say, without some of the stigma that some people may feel, although use is widespread. I think the Money Helper site will also give you links to benefit entitlement as well, and there are links to sort of household support funds and how to contact local authorities for that. So there's quite a lot that people can do on that side of things, and then then on the sort of more micro level, again, budgeting is important with food shopping as well, and a meal planning to avoid waste, and things like that. So there's sort of 2 areas that people can look at, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have on our own website, the Commsave website, there is a benefit checker tool that's available on there. So anybody that wants to can go on there, use that as a free resource, and just check if there might be something that they're entitled to that they're not currently claiming. So I know we've helped quite a number of our members out with that resource already. So it's definitely something we'd encourage people to use.
And I think on that subject, there is a lot of unclaimed benefit out there, isn't there? And
huge
I saw
amounts,
something last week that it was 1.6 billion in pension credit. So that's just one example of an underclaimed benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. Other area I feel we don't particularly talk about anything like enough is planning for retirement. Certainly something that when you're younger, although it seems a long time ago for me now, you kind of think it's so far in the future that I'll worry about that some other day.
Yeah.
I guess what would you say to somebody to kind of help them recognise the importance of retirement planning and encourage them to engage earlier in life? And I think particularly given people's nervousness around investing, which I think you touched on before.
Yeah. No, I think there is certainly nervousness, and I think when people are perhaps in the 20s and just starting out, it's natural to want as much sort of disposable income as possible, isn't it? And certainly in my own situation with my own kids, old dad, do I have to join this pension scheme? What I'd say to any people in that position listening, I'd just say, look, when it comes to investing for the future, time is your friend, for a couple of reasons. One is, saving for retirement. The earlier you start, the easier it is. I was doing some calculations recently, and I think just to use an example of a 25-year-old saving about £200 a month, looking to retire at 60. If they delayed by 5 years, if everything else is equal, the retirement fund is about 30% lower. If they delay by 10 years, it's 50% lower.
Yeah.
So the key message there is start early, because if you look at retirement savings as a hill, the longer you leave it, the steeper the hill is to climb.
Yeah.
I think the other thing, and you touched on investments, James, is time helps with investing. Simple reason: if someone's in the 20s, the mid 20s, the earliest they can get their hands on that pension money, at the moment it's going to go up to 57 in a couple of years' time. So it gives them about 30 years of investing at least. And the reason why that's important, and I can understand why people are nervous about investment markets, because there can be some quite steep fluctuations. But what time gives you is it gives your investments time to recover. So if there is a shock, you don't need to worry about it when you're in your 20s and early 30s, because you have got that recovery time. But what I would encourage people to do is have a look at your pension funds and understand what's in them. A lot of people will be in what's called a default fund. So I'd encourage you to look at your fund fact sheet, understand what the fund is made up of, so you can actually get an appreciation of where your money is actually invested. But while you're younger, if it dips, don't worry too much about it, because you've got time for it to recover.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is, again, one of the things where it links into the workplace scheme. I think there's so many benefits from being involved in workplace schemes and the contributions that employers will make on top of your own contributions. So I think we'd very much encourage people to kind of seek out information in that area, and where applicable to take appropriate independent financial advice.
I think so. And I think, I talked about my own kids and encouraging them to join their workplace pension, but even the sort of least generous workplace scheme, it will typically double an employee's own contribution in a month.
Yeah.
So your net contribution out of net pay gets topped up by your employer, and it gets topped up a bit more by tax relief as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there are sort of techniques where people can painlessly increase saving as well. I've seen people use, I've heard it called save more tomorrow, but what effectively people do is they allocate the first 1% of any pay rise to the pension.
Okay.
The only caveat to that, and I think we'll probably come on to talk about it, is making sure in doing that, and retirement saving is great, but also making sure people have enough liquid, accessible money for short-term emergencies as well.
Yeah, and you don't have to start big. We're building up that habit over time of learning to, if you like, live without a certain amount. Can reap those long-term benefits, because you've got that time to gradually increase, and you get used to managing the larger amounts that it can become healthy to invest.
Yeah, I think so. And I think just the final perhaps point on it is, whilst it's easy just to stick it away in your 20s and not worry about it, I'd just encourage people to dip in, and certainly once you get into your 30s and approaching your 40s, dip in a little bit more often, just to keep in control of things.
Yeah, no, that's really good, pretty good advice, I think. Another thing I thought it would be worthwhile just touching on, whilst we're talking about having healthy conversations about money, is the link between money and mental health. There are so many stats out there that kind of demonstrate that link between money worries and poor mental health. One I saw, which again I think was Money and Pension Service research, was that somebody who's experienced a mental health problem in the last 3 years is 4 times more likely to be behind on priority bills, which is quite a startling figure. And of course, we know that this works both ways. So money worries can themselves be a cause of poor mental health, but we also shouldn't overlook the fact that somebody with poor mental health for any other reason might then experience money difficulties. So there's a real connection there between these two things. So what kind of help is out there for people in this kind of space?
I think that there's a huge amount of help, but you're right, James. It sort of works both ways, doesn't it? You know, that there's that sort of two-way relationship between money and mental health. I think the first thing is if you're struggling, you know, with mental health as a result of money worries, I think this is going to sound really obvious, but it's so important to get help. And this is where start the conversation comes in. You know, the theme for Talk Money Week, because you know. I think money worries can be all encompassing and they're with you day and night, you know. So I think first of all, share that problem. What I would also say is, you know, there is a huge amount of resource out there. And again, I'll start with the Money Helper site. There's a section on there, and it's entitled Money Problems and Mental Wellbeing. And it's a really, really valuable part of the site. Again, if you punch that into the search engine on there, it'll bring up a range of resources, which I would say is a good starting point. You know, that there's checklists and all sorts. There's immediate actions you can take. There's links on how you can get further help. Speaking of which, you know, I think the first thing, as I said, you know, is to share that problem, you know, with somebody else, and that doesn't necessarily have to be a health professional, but it can be. But even if it's someone just to sort of, you know, open your post and start responding for you, you know, because I think the longer people leave it, the worse it becomes. So, you know, get somebody involved, have a look at the resources online. But if necessary, go and speak to your GP, because the NHS are well versed in dealing with money and mental health. We actually deal with mental health practitioners within the NHS and organisations like Money and Pension Service and others. You know, we've actually helped train people who work within mental health to actually have those money conversations as well. So the NHS are well equipped to have those conversations too. But there's plenty out there. But the key message is seek help sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
And as I say, a good starting point is that money problems and mental health resource. And what I would emphasise is there's some really good links to other resources from there. You know, an example of that is that there's actually a money and mental health toolkit, which actually sort of sets out an action plan for people to follow as well.
Okay. Yeah, excellent. As I say, we'll make sure that all of that is in the description for the video as well. So I thought it'd be interesting to just round up thinking about, as a credit union, what the role of credit unions can be in supporting the goals of Talk Money Week. How do you see the role of credit unions in this area?
I think there's a massive role because, you know, credit unions encourage saving, and if people save, that increases the financial resilience. And what we mean by that is just people's ability to withstand a financial shock. So, you know, whether that's an unexpected bill, you know, a sudden call on money. You know, if people are saving regularly via a credit union, they have ready money there that can help pay that unexpected bill. I think the other thing that the other sort of benefit of credit unions is that if you're saving, it actually makes it easier potentially to borrow as well. And that's important because credit unions represent affordable borrowing. And we come across lots of examples of people who are in debt, and they end up borrowing from unauthorized people, you know, loan sharks, for example, and that can create longer term financial issues. So, you know, credit unions can help the savings habit, but they can also provide access to credit should people need it. And I think increasingly what we're seeing is credit unions working with employers, which then makes it easier to save, because I think, you know, they're offering payroll saving schemes where people are effectively saving before they receive money in the pay packet, and psychologically that helps. You know, that helps a lot because you never have your hands on the money.
I think that's so key. It's definitely one of the things that we hear a lot from our members, that if you make saving the first thing somebody does each month rather than the last, excuse me, then it just is about developing those kind of good habits. You almost learn to live without the money that you're putting away through the payroll savings scheme. We hear this so many times from our members in terms of one of the key benefits they see about using their credit union. And I think the other thing it ties into is all the work we do in terms of financial education. It's one of those things that is, if you go back to the 1979 Credit Union Act, which was the first piece of legislation in this country to affect credit unions, financial education is actually written into the goals of the Act. It's one of the key reasons that we're here. It's not just about providing savings and loans for people. I know one of the things we do, for example, is our Commsave Educates app, which is a free resource that's out there for anybody to be able to use. And that app enables people to learn in very sort of bite-sized chunks across lots of different areas. You set your goal, and the system will push the relevant content to you.
Yeah.
So I guess that's something we really encourage people to utilize. And I think all those things together, having access to a way to save, being able to borrow should you need to, and having access to educational resources those are the three things that kind of contribute to being able to build financial well-being.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think those sort of simple and easy to use educational resources are vital. I mean, there's plenty of financial education seminars out there, and we deliver them as you do, but that's not everyone's preferred way of learning. So I think just those online, instantly accessible forms of information are absolutely vital. So yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, perfect. Well, that's great. I think that brings our time to a close, Gavin. So I'd like to thank you very much indeed for joining us for this episode of Commsave Conversations. It's been really, really good to hear from you about all those different facilities that are there through things like the Money Helper website. So thank you for joining us. And for everybody who's been watching, thank you for joining us. We will look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Please do leave us a like, a comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell to be notified about future podcasts, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. So thanks very much for joining us, Gavin.
No, thanks for having me, James. Really enjoyed it.
That's great. Take care, everybody.